Welcome, everybody. This is the May 1st meeting of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. Cameron is absent.
Here.
Peter's on.
Here.
And
Present. Present.
present. That's great.
Here.
Present.
Hello, Julian Harris.
Hi.
Planning Department.
Heather.
We have minutes to go over. Has everybody had a chance to read? Wonderful job again, Stephanie. I have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Um, last time when we got together, we formed some working groups. And it's really exciting to see the progress that working groups are making. Real tangible things are starting to happen. And it's all plunged in enthusiasm, energy. We'll get reports from all of you. I'm excited that we're close to webinar or seminar series that Benson's looking at. We're close to a proposal for feasibility studies. Renewable energy sources from our water treatment plants. It's a nice way to bike off. Energy fast. Preview all this to the council. Something that's going back. So, our staff. Comes back positive. Thank you for working.
Yeah.
Burning up the phone. So, Tracy is not able to make it tonight. We'll just touch on some of the areas that group has been working on. I did want to mention we had this list of where the energy efficiency block grants would go. There's good opportunities in weatherization, pre-weatherization, that's an it's. But I did want to mention around transportation. Everything's intersects with transportation. Housing community, there's a big transportation. Business development. Study of microtrends. So that's going to be, we should be coordinating. Today, there are studies in the very early stage. But it could be after the transit on demand solution contract, it could be partial shuttle loop, it could be a combination of the two. That's in progress. Other work areas. Did you have a chance to talk?
I haven't had the opportunity, unfortunately. Yes.
Probably I know. Discussions. PHA.
Yeah, so they're open to writing a letter. regarding the grant about aggregating utility data for the
Data
state.
platform.
Okay.
Talk offline.
Okay.
Just on that, Counselor, as I mentioned to Ben, in the CPCNH board packet that sent along, there's a pretty comprehensive update on that GRIP grant
Yes.
from Clifton in terms of where things stand and kind of the initial focus areas working with communities. So that might be helpful to that section of the board packet might be helpful to get into the hands of our committee. Yeah. I just noticed that the other day. And I don't think there's anything specifically we as a community or as a city need to do at this point in terms of their filing. I think they're in good shape. But the update by Clifton, I think, just gives us a nice overview of where it stands. It was pretty comprehensive.
And it underscores the necessity of
Yeah, and they're going to be hiring, if funded through the grant, a position, an FTE at CPCNH that would be working with the communities in like 5 focus areas.
and public transportation and it's happening there. It's kind of neat that this grant program singles out system for water. So let's then you would comment. What to do to get programs on.
The grants. You know,
And anything else on the program for
mhm.
solar working group? We put the feasibility study request draft into place. Purview one of this.
Yeah, I can just give a little bit of history on how this kind of all unfolded since the last meeting. So I had a conversation with Brian Getz. Initially, I was thinking about a wind turbine potential out at the Pierce Island wastewater treatment facility. And Brian said, there's not a lot of room out here, but we're definitely open to looking at that. So I've had a couple conversations with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, and they've been great. They have lots of money, lots of people, and they are out trying to find communities like Portsmouth that are in need of their technical expertise, which is great. And through this process, we had conversation with Peter Britz too. And they were also asking, do you have any other facilities? I said, yes, well, we have 2 wastewater facilities. They said, well, if we look at one, we should probably look at both. And they also said, let's look at solar too. We know you have small footprints, but let's look at solar, because as they were looking at their satellite images. They said, oh, it looks like you have a swimming pool with a parking lot that's adjacent to your wastewater facility. You know, that could be a prime candidate for solar canopies. And to put solar canopies there, and, you know, not to say, let's not do a wind turbine. But so they said, let's open it up and let's look at all options, and let's look at battery storage too, while we're at it, and see what is feasible, what makes sense. And I also reached out to the state of New Hampshire, which has a monitoring station out at Pierce Island, and they're great about sharing all the data. So although it's not the exact location, it's pretty close. So we have historical wind speed data from Pierce Island, which we can give to the experts. So the proposal is that we engage NREL through a program called Expert Match. And that expert match is they'll provide up to 60 hours of technical resources to do whatever we need them to do. And a feasibility study would fall underneath of that. They think it's probably going to take more, especially for the two facilities, it'll take more than 60 hours. But the leadership at NREL, somehow this got to somebody in leadership who happens to live, I think, in Beverly, Mass. And the message got back to me. They said, don't worry about the 60 hours. If it goes over 60 hours, NREL will cover it. We really want to work with the city of Portsmouth on this technical, this technical engagement, which is great. So the proposal, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to provide answers, but the proposal is that city of Portsmouth engage with NREL to do this feasibility study of both of our wastewater treatment plants and come back in the scope of the deliverables I put in the proposal, but to come back and see where what's feasible when it comes to solar, wind, battery storage at these two locations. And what NREL told me was the key word is resiliency. And so they said, when you're looking for federal resources and for funding, resiliency is a key term. And the fact that we're a coastal community, we really fit into that. And the fact that one of our wastewater treatment plants happens to be actually on an island really, drives that. That was a big point for them. They said, wow, this definitely fits under resiliency. And then obviously the other benefits that we gained from that. Any questions?
Let me just add something too. Herb, initially you sent out some other ideas you found regarding the wind turbines. So we're not talking about huge wind turbines on Pierce Island, but one of the unique ones you discovered was I think it was from Holland, if I'm not mistaken, where they are making these mini turbines that actually look like tulips, and they twist in the air like that and look very attractive as well. And so they're all sizes that fit whatever location people want to put something at. So these are not big obstructives. It would not be that efficient to put big turbines in that area anyway, even if you could. But maybe some of these other smaller devices might be pretty useful. Yeah.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that, NREL told me the history of wind turbines, and I didn't fully understand this. They said, about 20 years ago or so, wind turbines in this country got a really bad rap because they were not that efficient and the maintenance was through the roof. They were not reliable. The designs just were not good. So a couple of years ago, they started a certification program, and now NREL doesn't recommend using any wind turbines that aren't NREL certified. So it's another stamp of approval.
Well, just as a side note to that, if anyone has ever heard of the Energy Observer, which is a catamaran marine vessel, five-member crew, which has been sailing the ocean since 2017, sorry. So 7 years. And what that it was engineered in France, I believe. And the concept was, let us create a marine ship that can be self-sustaining. And what that ship does is it has solar panels all over the boat. It has wind turbines on the boat. And it creates also its own hydrogen. And with all these three wind sources, it can sail independently of anything. And it's been doing that into Antarctic areas and all over the country, all over the world. And making the case that, you can create totally energy independent vehicles these days using current technology.
Well, I was just, I think it's great that it's an open-ended feasibility. That it's either or a mix. They're gonna look at which is gonna be most efficient for us. I was looking in the city budget of the 3.5 million that we spend on electricity. I think 1 million is in the water and sewer. So it's a big chunk.
Mhm,
And if we can drive some
mhm.
behind the meter savings, lower the carbon footprint, it'd be a big reduction in carbon, I assume.
Yeah.
It's 1/3 of our electric bills, so.
Just a back of the envelope calculation, that's at least $25,000 in free consulting if it stays at 60 hours. So that's a nice gift that the city would receive. Interestingly, when I reached out about like the solar educational series to Jess at the sustainability committee, she mentioned that on Monday night at the city council meeting, I'm reading from her email, there are two teachers, Nicole Stonrook and Chris Rose at the middle school,
Yep.
who will be presenting on student projects, highly researched, mostly accurate requests for proposals to invest in solar energy for city-owned properties. So I think this would just be such a beautiful thing to put in front of them right after hearing these well-researched presentations
Mhm.
be presented. So I don't know, your timing is impeccable, I feel. Yeah.
A blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
And I think that this, we all know from the amazing research that the team here has done on the grant opportunities, that there is a funding opportunity. If we have a feasibility study, that puts us in a really great position to say, yeah, we've got something, here's what we could purchase, here's what we could do with that grant funding. So yeah, I think it's awesome what you put together, Herb. And
I think that funding piece is really important. I feel reading all the legislation and such out there, it's difficult to navigate the funding opportunities and what does and what doesn't qualify, and to have folks from a federal agency help, at least on the federal side, maybe even on the state side, help navigate what some of those opportunities are.
Yeah.
Could be huge for the city of Portsmouth.
And I think one of the good things about the reputation that Portsmouth has outside of our area here is we have a good reputation as being a progressive city and so forth. And we try not to attract too many new people, but we have a magnetic effect on a lot of people. And I think that helps our reputation with agencies like that. They think, well, if we can do this in Portsmouth, this might have a bigger impact than just for the city of Portsmouth.
Showcase. And the middle school kids are great. Last year, I think one of them proposed floating solar panels in the mill pond.
Yeah.
So it's always fun when they present, and it sounds like they've done a lot more homework this year. It's less conceptual and they've actually started to do some arithmetic.
And Counselor, just, and Ben, I think, could talk to this gentleman better than I certainly can, but the new director that CPC&H is bringing on. It has a very strong background in all these areas, and I think it'd be a good resource to us in terms of advice and counsel. I don't know, Ben, if you want to mention.
Yeah, sure. I've worked with this guy a little bit over the years. He is an expert policy wonk. I mean, top notch. He's been at LBNL, another one of the national labs that just does excellent policy related research. He's very, very, very good get for CPC&H, and I agree with Kevin. To the extent that we can maybe pick his brain, ask him to review any ideas or concepts or proposals we have.
That's why he's being brought on, you know, for
Right.
the communities.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he starts today, so today's his first day.
Well,
Good timing.
yeah, good time. Yeah, I'm gonna be really interested to see what projects start to happen. And the question for us is, you know, should we sit back and watch other people be the guinea pigs, or should we lean in and be talking to them right away? That's a question I put to the committee. Because they're obviously set up to develop projects, and we have the option to locally add a half a cent or a penny to the rate and fund things. It's an interesting question of how you would get a community to vote on that, since we're not a town meeting. But, you know, there's a funding mechanism there. Projects. And he's obviously going to be, I think, mobbed by various towns right away. So see what starts to happen.
Yeah. I would suggest lean in, you know, particularly as a city in the state. You know, we're have a built, you know, one of the larger footprints of the member communities.
Sure. Well, the other exciting thing is that the coalition is becoming a power purchaser for renewables. As they're negotiating for some hydropower in Berlin, they're negotiating with some solar fields. So they're making a market for local projects, which is intriguing.
I mean, they're up to 66 communities now. Concord just joined. Yeah. So,
I think one of the biggest assets we might have here is we're in the seacoast. So we probably get more wind than most communities. So if there's some way of making use of that, that might be a little stronger for us than other communities who are more inland.
you can put it in my backyard on South Mill Pond. It's windy there on a calm day.
I know so many of these projects are able to fund themselves, either through utility savings or power purchase agreements. I mentioned Betsy, the Exeter project. They're building a 1.7 megawatt solar field to run their sewer treatment plant. And they're gonna own it themselves. Have Revision Energy build it. And it's cash flow positive every year after they bond for it. And after they pay off the ownership, it's very lucrative. So,
That's a lot. Where do they put that? Do you know where
well, they have an old landfill. It's 6 acres, 6 or 7 acres. It's tough to find 6 or 7 acres in Portsmouth, although you can. But they happen to have a lot like that. So, you know, projects of that scale with a power purchase agreement start to really become very attractive. And the Exeter estimates their offtake is 95% of their municipal utility consumption. So they're effectively decarbonizing. So
Get a no on city council for this would be a very bad sign. Such
Yeah.
a basic first step, but
Yeah.
an important one with
Yep.
clearly a big energy user for or consumer for the city. So what do we need at this meeting to decide, like, how we move forward with city council? Is this just gonna go on the agenda for Monday night?
I think
Staff conversation.
I didn't. I think it would be too fast because Peter Bryce and DPW have not had their chance.
And Peter Britz, getting them together in the same room.
Right.
Yeah, which hopefully we can make that happen next week.
Okay,
So I didn't want to,
but you could at least tease it up after this student
It's-
presentation.
Yes.
Okay,
and there's a one pager in the packet that talks about it.
great.
As well as the rest of the work that I did. So I put the cat on the roof then.
I think it's low risk in doing that at this point.
Well, I think that was what you and Peter, you figured out exactly how to make it all upside and no risk.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be well received. It's too bad we didn't have the middle school kids in 2 weeks, but
Yeah.
this will be good. So I would assume that Betsy, that assuming that Peter Rice signs on and is supportive, because it's his buildings he runs. And Peter's always a good one for what could go wrong.
Mhm.
That then we could take it to the next council. And I'd work with you on that.
The 20th?
Yeah.
20th meeting. Just I'm kind of snoring my way home. He lives 3
Yeah.
houses down from
Yeah.
me. I'm sure he wouldn't mind.
And I'll be out of the country from the 10th, which is next Friday, through the 20th. So just, not that it makes much of a difference, because you can figure things out, but that's right, I just wanted to get this meeting in with Peter Britz and DPW next week before I head out of town.
And in the past, like when Ben presented to the council for community power, I think it was you and Allison. Yeah, back up, yeah. It's really powerful when we have citizens talk to us. And there's a part of the agenda right up front for reports of committees. So I think that might be something that. Just 5 minutes on why this is a good idea. Answer questions.
I think I did something similar for Soul Smart.
Mhm.
In front of the council.
We don't bite.
No. You guys said yes.
There you go, see? Yeah. So that'd be good. Declan will say something funny.
Yeah.
So we can think about that. And then Betsy, why don't you fill us in on the other work that,
Sure, yeah, after our last meeting, a week or maybe 2 weeks afterwards was the sustainability fair. So I crashed the city table, which was a lot of fun, and just talked to residents and if they were resident, asked if they had considered getting solar for electricity, learned about people who are renting, people with houses, what their challenges were, what their areas of interest were related to it. Had a sign up sheet, collected some information about, or some names for folks that were interested in learning more. So great conversations. I summarized that into notes, which I don't think I got to Stephanie in time. So
no, it was in the.
was it in? Okay, thank you. That was magical because I got it pretty late. And then I went on vacation to Costa Rica and I read Electrify by Saul Griffith. I don't know if any of you read it, but it's a great read. And it was pretty like straightforward about like how personally we can decarbonize. And so it did talk a lot about rooftop solar, but it also talked about kind of other things that highly relate to the work that we do on this committee. And so kind of taking the feedback I got from the folks I engaged with at the sustainability fair and a little inspiration from Saul Griffith in this book I read over vacation. I put together an outline for what could be a few educational sessions, workshops with residents. And if you've had a chance to take a look and had any feedback on it, I would absolutely love it. I think there's probably like 2 or 3 things we could do over the course of the next year. And then some things that could be like in following years, things that might just require a little bit more time, especially on the municipal front, like one of what our series was to talk about, like what's the city doing? How are we leading by example? But the outcome of that work is, probably a year. So yeah, that was my thought. And Herb, you had the great suggestion that I reach out to Jess on the sustainability committee. And she shared with me that Portsmouth Climate Action, a project of Seacoast Can, has been organizing community conversations. And they meet weekly on Wednesday evenings, so that she's going to bring it up today and get the group's perspective about whether these sorts of webinars could be incorporated into those community conversations, and then we just jointly promote them together. And she was saying that I think the library is a great way to market this. And yeah, so instead of like creating our own thing, doing something collaboratively, co-marketing it. So I think you had some other suggestions, John, about people to tap as well, and I'll follow up with, and then the Portsmouth City newsletter, which, yeah, and I think first I'll coordinate with Jess, since that seems to make the most sense. And then I think your suggestions for how to market it would make sense for those series, but also like the community conversations as a whole.
Did everybody have a chance to see the list of potential seminars? Yeah.
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 Betsy, can you help me understand the outline here? It looks like it's electrify everything.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's 1, 2, 3 under that, but 3 then goes into A through F or A through E. So how does
Yes,
this all,
sorry.
if you could walk me through
So
the
I
big
did,
picture?
yeah, sorry, this got a little funky formatted. This is me on the plane back from Costa Rica. Sorry about that. So so under electrify everything, there's that sections 1 and 2 are really about like an intro, I would say, an intro conversation to have at these different workshops.
Okay.
So why is electrifying an important move we can all make to address our energy bills cost as well as the climate impacts? And so it's just a little bit more context around why these sorts of activities are important. And then the workshops would be items under 3, the deep dive community presentation. So that would be, one would be solar. And then the second one, presentation number 2, would be HVAC. So I'm using some of his lingo, your personal comfort infrastructure. It's HVAC, and it's specifically heat pumps.
Sure.
Heat pumps would be the third one. Then there's one on electric cars. And then future presentations could be municipal solar and grid connected batteries. Grid connected batteries is a little bit like PhD at this point for most. So I put those towards the future. So solar, HVAC, and EVs. And we might decide like EVs, people get it. We don't really need that. But I also thought maybe it's a good opportunity to talk about what we're doing around EV charging infrastructure in the city, and what you can do for having an EV charger on your house, and opportunities related to battery storage, as well as like there's Greenwave and other like local EV specific vendors. So
Great. So electrify everything would be germane to the 1 and the 2. And then 3 starts a series of deeper dives on things, but 3 isn't necessarily under electrify everything, or?
no, so I think the electrify everything is context that I would present in front of each of the 3 workshops I mentioned.
It's like grounding.
Yeah, exactly. It's
This
just
is
a little
why we're
bit more
doing this, is our
context
objective.
setting, like,
Okay.
yeah, and especially if it's a part of the community conversations where the focus is really around climate action. I think that is the context in which like, why, why are heat pumps important? Why are EVs important? And this is part of a series of a bunch of things where you can learn about how you can electrify it.
Thank you for clarifying all that. I think your list is awesome. Initial reaction on the electrify everything piece.
Mhm.
Isn't the other half of that is to also clean up the power sector too?
Yeah,
And so make, as long as that's incorporated there, I think this is great.
yeah, totally. And I think that in the context of that, that will, or the context for that is we do have to clean up our power. And so the first one being focused on solar, it's really to talk about how you can or clean your own power, or in the case of renters, we can talk about how they can opt up with CPCNH to get cleaner renewable electricity too. So having options for both renters and homeowners.
Great. The only reason that I stress that other piece of cleaning up the supply mix
Mhm.
is because at the regional level, they're not synchronized.
Yeah.
And
fair.
we're stressing the grid tremendously because we're electrifying, but the clean energy is not coming on fast enough.
Fair. So maybe dial that down a little
Not
bit.
dial it down, just the importance of doing both in
Right,
tandem.
in tandem, fair.
That's all. That's
Yeah,
because
totally.
we need to do both. We don't have time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And maybe Ben, since you are really expert in that, I'll just tap you as I put together a deck related to this, to make sure that I'm sending the right message.
Sounds good. And if you need
Not
help
that
with
anybody
Green
ever-
Wave, he's a friend of mine,
Oh, nice. Awesome. Wait, who is?
Jesse. Big Green Wave.
Oh, okay, got you. Yeah, he's awesome.
I was just gonna say, Aubrey, from Sustainability Committee would be a great resource when you get to the HVAC section. Because we did one of the original presentations that was part of this series, of community conversations on green buildings, and part of the whole section was on HVAC already. Like there was that was part of the discussion that day. And that's really his area of expertise. And, that's where we had the most questions.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, of the people that were in attendance. And these are nicely attended, 15 to 20 people
Yeah.
at the library. So it's been a nice series. And fed into the whole climate action plan process
Awesome.
over the last year. So I think it would be nice to continue with, here are the problems, we've identified problems, but then focus more on some possible solutions, because they haven't moved to that solution stage, besides talking kind of broadly about green buildings, and we were talking more about embodied carbon and that kind of thing. We weren't
Yeah.
talking about how do we get there besides having a policy around being greener.
And these, the way that I've outlined them, is to be like very pragmatic about it. Like, these are the kinds of people that you can get. Here's how you would go about the permitting process. And I'm trying to keep, space at the end for homeowners that have heat pumps to talk about how they went about it. So that I want that to be a theme. That's my suggestion as a theme in each one, is actually bringing in folks that have implemented these within the city limits and what their experience has been. So when the other part of this research was finding out where there are disincentives for doing solar. And so talking with folks that have tried to pick apart our zoning, one of the things that came up, and Peter Britz was, in agreement with this, and I have personal experiences, when you try to get a condenser outside and you live in the South End like we do, it's a very expensive process. I spent more on getting variance than I did the actual heat pump itself. And that's not okay, right? Yeah, we should be able to fix these things. And so having the ability to talk through some of those challenges, and through these workshops, identify where that's been a barrier for others, what problems they have faced, will be really helpful for us for removing those barriers. Interestingly enough, too, I heard, Peter, you're gonna love this. I went up to the Lowe's solar salesperson too and was like, what are you hearing on the street? What are people saying when you're trying to sell them solar as the barriers? And he's like, believe it or not, in Portsmouth,
I hear about everybody being upset about the whole metering situation not being on community power.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you're going in a lot and talking, not me, but folks are definitely flagging interesting things I wouldn't think are at the top of the list. So if we can get down to really pragmatic information, have residents talk about their experience, I think that list will grow and then we can start tackling them one by one.
So I
That's
think
great work.
in connection with what you were just saying about Portsmouth does have a reputation of being a little bit more complicated with regard to building permits and things like that, taking longer. In Europe, what the experience was with solar energy is that initially everyone was trying to drive down the cost of the panels. And the panels did get driven down mainly because of China, but also because of more and more people using them. But then they figured out that now the major cost of installing a panel now was the so-called soft costs.
Yep.
Was the installation, the permitting, the standards. And here in Portsmouth, for example, and as one example, the fire department's requirements for a panel are different from Greenland's.
Mhm.
Portsmouth requires more. Or as an outside circuit breaker shutoff, for example. Greenland doesn't. Now, either there is a good safety reason to do that, or every town is making it up. It's on its own. So it would be good to look into, like you say, barriers. Are these just, and normally what has happened, especially in places where it's not been that frequent. I mean, New Hampshire is a state that doesn't have that much solar, okay? That means we don't have as much solar experience. So when people don't have enough experience, you always err on the side of caution. You put in extra safety measures where they're not needed because you don't know for sure. I think it's worthwhile looking into those soft costs too, the barriers.
Yeah, it's a,
And do they have a good safety reason or otherwise a reason for doing that? Or is this something that people are being hyper cautious? And should we be trying to advocate for standardizing some of these rules that are both safe and efficient? Okay.
this is a point made in Electrify, and they give the example of in Australia, it's $3 a watt to install, or $3 a watt for solar, like all costs included. In the US, it's double that. And it's because of this patchwork
Yes.
and that high soft cost. So I think it's a valid point.
Yeah.
How we tease that out, I think will be really challenging. But hopefully through these conversations, we can figure out what those barriers are. And then, like I said, just try to systematically improve that, hopefully leading to a better outcome for folks. Even if it's just less hassle.
And incidentally, I've been researching some of these things as well regarding solar. For example, historic towns and what they're doing with their ordinances regarding solar. Also something called, what are they called? Solar. And think of the official word, easement, solar easements. So what towns are doing regarding solar easements where before you put something in, you want to have some agreement with your neighbors that they're not going to take away your solar at some point by building a building that's going to shade your solar collectors, for example, you know? And what are towns doing to, or what are owners doing to safeguard those assets on their
Right.
and different towns are doing it differently, but most of the time, most towns are saying, we don't want to get in the middle of this. But we encourage residents to have easements with their neighbors before they put something in. Or if you have already put something in, get an agreement with your neighbors that, you know, you agree that you have this and you want it to be part of your property as a value. And no one's going to take that away. The other thing I was looking at too is the demand side of this. We're talking about electrifying everything, which is great. But I think the number one thing we have to do is reduce demand. No matter how you electrify or power something, the less demand you have, the better. The lower the greenhouse gas emissions, the lower your prices are. And these things include, for the city, for example, include things like street lighting, okay? Or thermostats, control systems. At the indoor pool, for example, one of the things the SIP group discovered that when we ripped out all the old mechanical part of the swimming pool processing and managing the swim pool, water flows, chlorination, all that stuff. All those old systems, when you replace them with brand new systems that run at a much lower energy cost and usage, that was a dramatic savings right there. And so those are all things that the city has, all kinds of buildings and things that we have now, right now. And it would be good to kind of inventory those kind of things. I think maybe they already did this already. They
That-
know
that
what they're using and
We
so
should
forth.
talk about our call with Lebanon.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I
That-
think, I
that
feel like there's
eats
almost
up
kind of
a-
efficiency group that needs to be
Yes.
created with.
So I think that's the first step you gotta be very good about, because you can save a lot on that.
Definitely.
In fact, historically, in the United States, from 1975 to now, the energy consumption nationwide per capita, wherever they're calculated, there's been a 1/3 drop in energy consumption based only on all these systems that people put in: thermostats, insulation, better mechanical systems, all things that people refer to as the hidden energy resource, because you can't point your finger to just one thing. It's multiple things. You put in something like a digital control system, then you hook something onto it that controls that again, and all of a sudden you have more efficiency out of it. So there's all kinds of things we should be doing at the same time, and looking at the way to reduce demand first before we start electrifying.
Yeah,
So
I
maybe
think
that's-
Ben's point too, and so I would suggest, like, maybe there's an efficiency group that comes out of it. One thing we'll say, like, on the municipal side, we did have the conversation with Tad from the city of Lebanon. And we talked about his position and how important it was for getting access to solar, but also driving massive efficiency improvements. And he did share with us that his position was created. It's a joint position, so it's like Peter with planning and sustainability, but he's a facility manager and an energy manager. His position was created under the absolute expectation that it would be self-funded through energy savings. And the savings he was able to share with us that his position is brought about was significant, like millions of dollars.
13 million over
That's a
10 years.
10 years, 13 million, something like that.
Yeah,
years,
so
yeah.
I think, what's nice about kind of staging this with your work, Herb, to say, let's look at some feasibility for how we can save the city money, create some resiliency, clean our grid within the municipal project. Is hopefully when we come back with what the next steps are related to that, we can think about an energy manager role as a part of that for at least the municipal buildings, because we just know we're resource constrained without having that one person who's overseeing that and not knowing whether or not that can be incorporated into a facility manager role at this point. I think that's a goal we should shoot for. The other thing, just research wise quickly, on the barrier side and with zoning and soft costs, we had a conversation with, I'm missing zoning guy, is it
Tom Morgan.
Tom Morgan, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just me, I had a conversation with him and said, like, what would you do with zoning if you could, and like changing things around here? And, very long conversation about that. And he came back and I said, can you just give me a list? Like, what are the things that absolutely must have to be changed in order to encourage folks to access renewable energy in the city or improve their efficiency through things like heat pumps? And he told me at the sustainability fair, he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go into it. I'm gonna make that list for you. So hopefully, I don't know when, because this is like volunteer time for a person that's a zoning consultant, or planning consultant, I should say. We'll get that list and I'll bring that back to the committee, and maybe we could have him come in and present and have a conversation about, like, would we want to rank these and prioritize some, and who would we go to talk about that? So those are a couple of things that move more into the efficiency sphere, but I almost feel like it does need some too.
Yeah, and just to add some color commentary, if I could, then Penley. We called Tad in Hanover to talk about their solar project. And he said, you know, before you look at your energy supply, you got to reduce your energy demand. And like you were saying, Peter. And he's got all of their buildings on long-range plans as part of their capital spending to improve their efficiency. It was a concentrated, you know, deep dive into all those buildings, auditing them, but then and they're not that big a city compared to, I think they're smaller than us. But he's the guy who executes on it. And with contractors and consultants and he's seeing substantial savings over time.
And I think, Counselor, the Housing Authority, I know at CPC&H, we were starting to work with the Resilient Building Group, RBG. And when we were going through the RFP, one of the, their recommended clients was the Portsmouth Housing Authority. And I think they have used RBG to evaluate energy efficiency in all of the housing authority facilities. And I haven't been in Portsmouth long enough, but
Yes.
has the city done energy efficiency analysis of all of its facilities at some point? I mean, I would assume.
You know, I don't know.
There was benchmarking done a few years ago as an initial step.
Yeah,
There's been a few performance contracts, so
Yeah.
here and there.
Yeah, Tom, you were involved in some of that, right? Back
You
in
were with Peter.
2016, 17.
yeah, it seems like it's kind of low hanging fruit.
Kate,
I was gonna say, the challenge though, the challenge to some of this is a political one. Because it's about investing funds upfront in municipal buildings. And that's not popular in the city usually. It's also not usually terribly popular with staff. It's not the first thing they choose because they have other projects that they want to address. So it's about changing minds, I think, really, getting people to understand that the investment is worth the return. Because you're sitting in one of the least efficient buildings we have as a city right now, with an HVAC system that's original to the hospital that was here, that half the windows stay open in the winter because it's too hot in some rooms and other rooms it's too cold. And, I mean, this is an incredibly inefficient building, but it is not on the list in the CIP for major improvements anytime soon. So any kind of investment we make is a political one that we have to sell.
But we should also be leveraging, I mean, it's a great point, Counselor, but working through the utility and the New Hampshire SAVE programs to make sure we're leveraging any and all available programs through the utility, right? Because you're paying for it in your bill right now, on the distribution side or in the adders. So,
And that's why I'm curious about like performance contracting and how that's worked within the city too, because when I was the state industrial energy manager, we were retrofitting all the state buildings through performance contracts,
Right.
and it's savings on day one. And so I'm just curious, like how we've worked with ESCOs in the past and how that is not more and more fruit.
Well, I think we're not selling the idea of greenhouse gas reductions and energy reductions, because every megawatt, every watt saved is the same as let's say 1 pound of CO2, whatever equivalent it is. So you can do it either by switching power sources or all kinds of stuff, but you can also do it by reducing energy use. That's the simplest way. And usually the cost to reduce is actually cheaper than what you have to do to pay
Yeah,
for.
but like lighting is the only thing with a payback that shows up in an annual
Right,
budget
it's done
cycle.
here.
So that's, that gets done. But in reality, you want to have these blended projects where you're getting the long tail mechanism or the long tail measures with the short tail measures. So you get a blended return that's a little bit more, palatable. But even then, that's where a performance contract can come in. So I don't know, it just seems like that between grants and financial mechanisms that exist right now, we should be in a position to
find a politically palatable solution, but that is sort of where an energy manager comes in with a grants writer to say, okay, how do we package these things together so that we can actually show that we're in the green on some of these measures, prioritize them for the CIP.
There is a national effort in all over the country right now to look at street lighting, for example. A lot
Yeah,
of towns
we're
have
good on
decided
that.
to
We've got-
purchase
yeah.
their street light. You know, I don't know if we own our street lights or not.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we
and-
do.
and
So-
they're
so-
all LED.
So, no, not LEDs. Do we own the street lights? Does Eversource own the street lights? That's the big difference. I think Eversource still owns the poles. Well, what the difference is that if you don't own the poles,
You don't buy the.
The
pole,
operator-
You're just buying the fixtures. You're not buying the poles. Right?
well,
Poles
yeah,
are-
yeah,
yeah.
well, okay, so the fixtures, yeah,
Yeah.
but we used to have to pay Eversource a certain amount for
Sure.
each fixture.
Mhm.
And Eversource had no incentive to put LEDs in there because we still pay them the same amount. If it's incandescent bulb or a LED, it doesn't matter. So what towns have been doing throughout the country, they're saying, we're gonna buy out whatever utility owns our street lighting. And we're gonna try to make our street lighting the most efficient we can in order so that the saving comes to us. And that includes, for example, street lighting that doesn't have to be on all night long. I mean, we could have it on a low and high setting and it would automatically be triggered by motion detectors, whatever. But we have, you know, like everybody, we have street lights all night long when nobody's around. And in fact, some people complain that the street lights are on in their bedrooms all night long too. But the purpose of the street lights is to give street illumination to people who are there. When nobody's there, it's just a waste of energy. So but if you don't own that fixture, or whatever the device is that controls everything, you can't make changes on it unless it's. Sorry, Kevin, you're gonna. Yeah, so anyway, so what I'm saying is that's in our area. If we are in charge of those street lighting, we could dramatically change the consumption. I mean, streetlights are only on at night. Okay.
So that's a good example of increasing the efficiency of municipal. That whole program of work. How do we go to work on that? I think let's think about that for.
I was gonna say, Council, I mean, we covered a lot of ground in the last like 20 minutes, but I think getting credibility from the committee on smaller things can, going at a performance contractor, going at this building is, I think, well beyond what we're looking to do in the short term.
The
So I
voice of
think,
experience.
Yeah.
going back to some of the training you were talking about, I think it's a great point that there's a loading, they call it loading order. Starting out with efficiency, like if you're doing the trainings and you're electrifying everything, like the preface that you reduce demand, you do your energy efficiency first. And it could just be that, like one slide, like this has to be done first, then you
Yeah,
electrify.
I think it's a fair point.
And the other thing I was gonna say about, so I had a couple of heat pumps put in and I had to get a couple of variances and it was a bit of a pain, and Revision came in and pointed out, oh yeah, Portsmouth is a lot more challenging to work with, but Portsmouth required that they do a heat load calculation. And then they charged me extra and I asked them, wasn't this a good idea to do in any case? And they said, yeah, we should. It's a good idea. They're not required to do it in other places. So,
Tom, what is that?
I didn't have to do that.
so a heat load calculation means that you look at the insulation, your windows, you determine how quickly your home loses heat. And then you can size, rather than, you can't just go by square footage, because if you have a bunch of windows, or you have an uninsulated roof. So if you do it right, you size it properly.
Size
It's
it properly,
important.
yes.
So they should be doing that all the time. So it was a little surprising that, but I thought, well, good for Portsmouth.
Yeah, yeah.
For pushing that, even though I had to pay for it. Then the other one was they failed the inspection because of the outside line height it wasn't sealed. And so Revision was saying, well, you can't get into the house. Like, so there's no way like a rodent could get into the house. And I was like, all right, so they're just being sticklers, right? They went out, they fixed what they said, and they said, it was a really good idea. Now we're doing that everywhere. So the point being, I don't think we want to go anywhere outside of this committee and say,
Mhm.
Portsmouth, we should, lower or whatever.
Right, right.
Because we have that reputation, but I think what I ran into in those two instances is we were right, as a city, we were right. And it's making, in their case, it's making now some of their jobs better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
I
I-
think that's where, when you kind of like get a list of
Yeah.
complaints, we have to have some criteria for vetting and prioritizing which are the things that are the most meaningful to go after versus what are things that are legitimate protections of.
And some of us who've been on the council over the years have fielded a lot of these complaints that
Mhm.
it's hard to get permits in Portsmouth. And when you dig into it, in specific cases, you often find that we're using the latest building codes, and these towns like Greenland are using
Or not.
old building codes that are
Mhm.
much more lax, and less safe.
Mhm.
So, we're sticklers about when the latest electrical code or latest plumbing code comes out, we snap right to it.
Mhm.
And so that just is another way of saying what you're saying, Tom.
Mhm.
We're not gonna have credibility if we're seeking to roll back some of that safety stuff.
Yeah. Then there's like points of,
Frustration.
yeah, where it's like, does it need to go through the exact same process for a variance that like building a whole new structure on your
Mhm.
lot does? Is it the same application? Is it the same cost? Maybe not. Like, maybe we make that process a little bit easier. Maybe you encourage residents to do it, to say, if you're gonna do it, like, you don't get charged for this, or you don't have to. We were talking about my chickens today, or my desire to have chickens and how it costs a minimum of $200. Like, do we need to? Yeah.
This is something that we've been working in the Green Buildings Working Group.
Oh,
It is getting up up codes like
IECC.
yeah, this might be the next level
Yeah.
code. Into our code as an optional code
yeah.
and not necessarily and considering potentially not raising the prices for permitting if you go with the optional more green code.
Yeah.
So as the permitting costs go up, you get a discount if you use essentially, if you use the green code.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we're working on some of those trade-offs right now because we got green buildings codes into like a starter section into the code the last time we passed the code at the council. And so now it's how do we make that next step? And it has to be incentivized, not punishment,
Right.
because of the challenge of people struggling to get contractors
Yeah.
to work here. Because then if you make the code too onerous, you're going to have too many complaints
Right.
and no one's going to do anything, which you really want people to do upgrades.
Right.
So,
Mm.
so it's kind of this balance and we're getting there, I
Yeah.
think. It takes a long time to figure out what is allowed because at the State House this year, there were several bills and an effort to eliminate our ability to even have a greener code or even be up to the latest standards and codes. And making everyone in the state follow the same code that the state follows, which we're ahead a few years here. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like this balance politically, you also don't want to
Right.
move too
right.
quickly and trigger something in Concord.
But it would be great, like, just in identifying what these things are, even demything some of it. And having, some means to communicate why things are a certain way as a committee that should be looked to on all energy policy in our town. I think
Yeah,
it'd
and
be
some of it is policy choices. So it is. Like we used to have fire regs that kept solar panels. They couldn't get too close to the peak of the roof
Oh, that's my house too.
and, because the fire people wanted to be able to punch a hole in the roof.
Yes.
And it was it cut solar installations in half for a while in Portsmouth until it got changed. And that was a policy. So,
Yeah.
but it starts with an inventory of what are the barriers,
Yeah.
as you, I think that's on the money. And then you get the other side of the conversation, why that exists, what's the balance, and is it a policy choice?
Mhm.
I think that's just absolutely the right way so to go, so let's keep going.
Something else that we should consider too, though, is having one code. We have one code for the whole city. But there are areas of the city that are more sensitive, and so the code is targeted to those areas. For example, the South End. I mean, I live in the South End. My house is 1.5 feet from my neighbor's house, right? So the fire department's a lot more sensitive about the code because they're thinking about the South End. They're not thinking about other neighborhoods where, you really don't need to be thinking the same way about fire code. And so, we could be also asking the city to think about having a distinctive code for a certain neighborhood, because I know the fire department already has one for my little part of the South End where you're not allowed to have wood burning fires outside. You can only have gas fires outside because it's just too much of a risk.
Yeah.
But that's not the case for the entire city.
Yeah.
So there is already a distinction. And so getting the city to start thinking about, well, maybe we can make other distinctions too that allow for some of these options.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, when we troubleshoot on that list, and those are awesome options to consider. Yeah, so.
One thing that I've been to a couple of those community conversations, and I love the fact that it is actually a conversation. And you're not, the people that are attending those are not just going there to hear a monologue about heat pumps or something else. They've always, in those, there's an initial education part of those conversations, those sessions, but then they usually will have a breakout and do some sort of collection, feedback from the residents, which has always been, and I think that would be hugely valuable for us, is to listen to what the residents, what issues have you had, but then also what has worked well that we, should continue and just leave alone because it's good.
So let's pull us back a little bit. We've been discussing two pieces of work that Betsy's doing. One on the understanding the barriers, researching that, the other on the seminar series. I'm hearing maybe one of the seminar series or part of the seminar series is the energy you don't use
Yeah,
reduction.
putting some slides in the beginning of all of those presentations.
And how that can pay for itself. And then I think we've had a good, healthy discussion on some of the barriers to heat pump installation, solar panel installation. Councilor Cook is right. There's a political dimension to that. So I think we identify the barriers as you're doing, and then we get the other half of the conversation, why they're there. Is there a valid reason?
So I'll work with Tom on building out that list as we have these conversations. We'll keep adding to them. We use these meetings to add to that too. And then I'm a consultant, so the way I think about it is you build a list and then you start to analyze, research and analyze. So making sure we have appropriate context for why it's a barrier and then the point of view of why it should exist. And from there, we could do some sort of exercise where we prioritize the rank, but right now it's still information gathering.
John, I think within our group, the question came up whether we have a comprehensive list of people who have solar collectors in the city already on their roofs or wherever, because thinking about this idea of what experiences residents have had with it, it would be kind of an interesting thing to try to do is to contact all these residents and say, you have solar in the city, okay? Are you willing to come to some kind of an event where you can share your experiences, pro and con, what you'd like to see happen in the future? How do you think people could be encouraged to do it more? Get feedback from actual people who are doing it instead of people who are aspirationally want to do it.
I
mean,
think
we
we
know-
know that through the city newsletter.
And through, I mean, CPCNH through its go live had to know
That's true.
all
That's
of
right,
the.
that's right. You
right.
guys
I
had to
mean,
know.
And it's peanuts. It's like 150 in the whole city.
Well, all the easier it
Talking
is to
like-
get them
like a
together.
Microscopic population in the city. But it's, if they're identified as a net metered customer in the utility billing records, we needed to know because we couldn't convert
That's
them
right,
to.
that's right.
To
Convert
community
them over.
power. So as long as they're identified properly in the Eversource's billing records, we know who they are.
Is that the same list as the city has when they when they asked for an inventory of people who would get that discount? That their collectors would not be put on the property value tax? Because
I
we
don't
did
know.
that too. I have the certificate at home saying, okay. I had to submit a form to the city to say, this is what I have on my roof, and as the consequence of doing that, I was told it would not be used to evaluate my property tax.
So there's.
So there must be a list for the city to do that.
Talking with Jillian today, I
Yeah.
looked at my site plan and actually, and my tax record, and it lists solar, even though I didn't do that. I probably should have it removed from my property tax, but it is listed on your lot plan and whatever it's, what is it called? You want the tax card? Tax card, yeah, it does show up. So if you have solar on your roof, it had to get
Yeah,
permitted.
if you had to pull a permit, they.
Yeah, but
update
it
the
was,
records.
but it won't be taxed for property tax purposes.
Yeah, if you go through that process,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. There was a process to do that because
but not all of us.
I
have
had to
that.
submit that my installation was a certain price. And instead of putting that as a value of my home, I was given some kind of credit for that or something. It was not put on the total cost of the house. And so that must be a record that the city has. Who got that?
Right, it might all be manual though.
And I'm
whereas
wondering-
the CPC and.
See, I'm
record
wondering if
is
that's the same list.
a
I'm
database.
saying this because there are people who like to get solar, but don't even register it as such because they don't want to get involved in the auction issues and selling their credits and all that stuff. They just want to do it. And for that reason, not everything up in the state is registered. If they didn't register with the PUC, then it's not registered. So when the city was giving this variance for the value of the solar, it might be a different list than what you guys have from the Community Power Coalition.
So for the purposes of doing like a solar workshop and getting residents who have solar to speak about it, I do have names, actually people at the sustainability fair, like, yeah, I'm. happy to
110
talk
of them,
about it.
110 of them?
Yeah, totally, no.
Oh,
Two.
well, there's that many of them. There-
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but I mean, I
or
think for, in
50 or
terms of
60.
like having a community conversation about it, there are definitely some folks we've identified who are willing to speak
Yeah.
about it, bringing together solar owners who have worked through these issues. I mean, I definitely, Peter, if that's of interest, I
Well,
have,
people are not gonna, all 110 are not gonna show up or something. I'm just saying there should be some outreach to those people to say, would you like to share your experience? You know, and here's an opportunity.
yeah,
And if we have 30 people show up, that'd be great, but
Okay, good. Any other questions for Betsy and on that? Good work. Yeah. Forward to helping you in any way we can. I think Clean Energy New Hampshire can be a good resource
yeah.
as well for speakers, for,
And even the New Hampshire Saves on the seminar side, I would think.
Yeah.
Just
yes.
always makes sense to leverage into those programs and what's available, make sure our residents know what's available
Yeah.
and
I
take
think for those
advantage of it.
Intro slides, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tap what they have,
Mhm.
remind folks what's available, and I'll use, I would say it's Desiree, Directory of State Incentives for Renewable Energy, but it lists all incentives for efficiency and renewables too, so. Yeah, just I'll put that in, what's that?
Desire.
Do you?
yeah.
Mine's more of like a rock star name, Desiree. I'll go with Desire too, it's a great website.
Okay, quick update on Seacoast Green Power Challenge. The city manager and I are working on a Zoom call with the other city managers. Stratum has expressed interest, Rye declined. It's too bad. Lisa said she couldn't get her energy committee to go for it. But that's right. And so I'll send an email out to everybody when we've got more developed. We just want to have. What do you measure to win? What do you win? Maybe it's just a trophy.
Hey, a dinner at a Portsmouth restaurant, that'll do
Dinner down.
it.
Anything else that we can discuss? I think we helped shape the seminar series. We've helped find out the next steps with the wastewater treatment stuff. Yeah. Macro trends, Ben, that we should be aware of, aside from the grid can't handle all this.
The Bowen Lease area is a big deal.
The what?
The Bowen Lease area on the Gulf of Maine.
Yeah.
Finally
Oh,
released the
yeah.
Wind energy area.
The
That's-
wind-
yeah, that's pretty exciting. But
Right, that's right. That's right. I
For
mean,
wind.
they put it out to bid now, right?
I think that's next. Releases, yeah.
Yeah.
Auction.
And what's happened to offshore wind for New Hampshire?
Some bills kicking around to enable procurement authority, bills around to support port infrastructure. Yeah, but to my knowledge, nothing has made it all the way across the finish line yet.
Okay, I know David Waters has been working on that.
They were trying to get the state to sign up some kind of procurement. And They still
Somebody
haven't
named
done it.
Rebecca Perkins is also
Okay.
involved. Do you know her?
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm sure she's involved.
She's involved.
Okay. Well, she'll keep moving on that for sure. Anything else? If not, we'll keep on working on our projects. Thank you all for great work over the last month. A lot took shape. Let's keep going.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
What's new over at Eversource these days?
Two.